What's up YouTube? I'm Mike, and today I have my American flag shirt on because we're going to be celebrating a really great part of the criminal justice system in America. I know the criminal justice system gets a lot of heat in America, and admittedly everything leading up to a jury trial is massively weighted against you if you are a defendant, which is why going to trial is the single most important thing you can do, because that's when the burden of proof actually falls on the state. So as they say, you are innocent until you are proven guilty. And what unfortunately happens for most Americans is that they take deals and they give away their constitutional rights. So when you go to jury trial, prosecutors basically never want to go to trial. There are so many legal loopholes. There's so many things that can go wrong for a prosecution. The least of which is the fact that one of the things you have to understand is when you go to trial by jury, your fate is being determined by a jury of your peers. These are people just like you and me. You get this idea that all these people are going to be like tight asses or something. Nothing can be further from the truth, and I'm going to display that in good fashion here pretty quickly. I actually last night I went through some of my legal paperwork. I was hoping that I could find her original complaint, what she originally wrote the day that I was arrested, because it honestly is kind of funny when you take in consideration what a departure from that writing we end up getting to in the jury trial. But I did find a couple other documents to set the stage here. So I was wrong yesterday. I said that we offered them 24 months. What I found here was a document that my attorney presented. I don't know how well this is going to come out on camera. This document, it was sent by my attorney to George Appel, A-P-P-E-L. Hey, George. Who was then the prosecuting attorney. He was supposed to be like the special counsel guy. He was like the big shot. He was known for putting guys like me away forever. And he was not willing to play ball on my case. So what we actually offered him, I had forgotten this. My attorney beat me down and got me to offer to plead guilty to one count of assault to a second degree assault, unlawful imprisonment with a firearm enhancement, assault in the fourth degree domestic violence, which is a misdemeanor. That would carry a sentencing range of 24 to 36 months. And so we were going to be asking for the low end of that. The significance of this is he actually got me to agree to plead guilty to a serious violent charge. The second degree assault is a serious violent, that's a strikeable offense, like I told you yesterday. And he said that he didn't even feel like there was any chance that the prosecution would take this deal, and they didn't. I think George Appel actually laughed my attorney out of his office. So what they did do is they amended the charges to what they were actually going to bring against me in the state court in Snohomish County, Washington. So I have this document also prepared by my attorney. We'll see if it comes through on the screen. I think it just came through. What you see there is the list of all of the charges that they attempted to prosecute me for, and the maximum and total sentences. So what they said, if you take this to trial, you're facing a second degree assault with a deadly weapon for pointing a handgun at her. A second account of assault with a deadly weapon for supposedly pointing a gun at her some second time. Unlawful imprisonment with a deadly weapon. Harassment with a deadly weapon for threatening to kill her. And then assault by means of strangulation. This one is really going to be interesting when we get into the facts and evidence of the case. So that would be 2 strikes on this particular case. The total range is, it comes out to a total of 144 months is what I took to trial. The actual sentencing range on all of those crimes combined is 33 to 43 months, but because each one of those charges has anywhere between a 36-month and 18-month weapon enhancement, you get it tacked all the way up to 144 months is what I was facing in prison. So that's what I had to accept going into trial, which I don't remember exactly when it started. So, and then I'll get to this last piece later. So, obviously, like I said, there was like a 2-month period where it was just a waiting game. I told you in the previous video that I was practicing my case, practicing my testimony. I'd already gone over her deposition statement, so I knew exactly what she could testify to in court. Now, the deposition doesn't necessarily prevent you from changing your story on the stand, but you're going to be impeached on it. So we pretty much know this is what she's going to testify to, and if she changes her testimony, it's not going to go good for them. So the night before the trial, a couple of interesting things happened. Again, one, I'm not a religious man, but for the first time in a long time, I prayed to God. And this was the prayer that I prayed in my cell the night before trial. I said something to the effect of, God, I don't know if you're out there, and I certainly doubt that you care very much about me, given the fact that I don't believe in you. But if you are real, and if you are the person that the deity that Christians say you are, I hope that you will seek my heart. You will know the man that I am. If you are truly omnipotent, omniscient, all-knowing, you will know my heart, and you will know that I do not deserve to go to prison for 144 months. So basically, if there's anything you can do for me, now's the fucking time. That was my prayer. I didn't fall on my knees. I didn't profess a faith. I just called out to generic God. If you're out there, seek my heart, know that this is what they're doing to me is not right. And so I knew that it was going to be very difficult to stay composed while I was going to be facing all of these people who were going to be saying all these horrible things about me. And I happen to be a giant Tool fan. And Tool, for whatever reason, is a band that just is cathartic to me. It gives me a tremendous amount of peace. And so I got a piece of paper. I was only allowed to bring paperwork into the courtroom. And so I got a piece of notebook paper. At the very top of the notebook paper, I wrote, "Enjoy this experience." And the reason that I wrote that is because you have to understand, there's no guarantees that I was going to win here. It was very likely, according to everyone who had counseled me on this, that I was getting ready to get convicted of all five of those counts, and I was going to be sentenced to 144 months in prison. And so my mindset going in was, if you go in here with the plan on winning and you lose, you're going to be devastated. So you have to go into this experience with the attitude that you are having just that, a near-life experience. Like, not very many people on earth, hopefully, have ever sat through a jury trial facing this amount of time. This is not something everyone gets to do in life. And so I tried to view it as a positive. I was just looking for ways to stay positive. So I said, hey, look, you're getting ready to go have this unbelievable experience. Try to enjoy it for what it is. And then underneath that, I had the lyrics to a parable written by Tool that says, "Embrace this moment, remember, we are eternal, all this pain is an illusion." And then down all over, there was various lyrics that basically kind of became like my friends or something. It was like, I put different lyrics on this page, almost like a Christian would use Bible verses. So if I felt myself becoming angry, I could look at something. If I felt myself becoming scared, I could look at something. If I felt myself becoming sad or whatever, like there was something written all over this page that I could turn to try to give myself a sense of peace or try to get a grip and stay calm, because the last thing you want to do when you're sitting there at the the defendant's table is look very emotional. One of the things that my attorney and I disagreed upon was, he told me, you are to sit there and to be stone-faced. They're going to say a lot of things about you, and you have to sit there and ignore it. And I said no. And he was like, what? And I was like, no, I'm not doing that. And he said, yes, you are. And I said, look, Leonard, I've spent a lot of time watching jury trials. And I watched the defendant very closely. If I was a juror, I would be watching the defendant. And when they make a claim that I strangled my wife, if I just sit there like bold-faced, to me that makes you look guilty. If somebody says something about you that is a massively insulting, categoric lie, it is in human nature for you to recoil from this. And he's like, so what do you want to do? You just want to like throw your hands up and yell out in the courtroom? And I said, no. I think that I should at least be allowed to show something on my face that is either agreement or disagreement. Some of the things that they say are going to be true, and some of the things they say are going to be false. And if the jury can get a read from me as to when I'm agreeing and disagreeing, I feel like I might be able to develop a rapport with them that I'm not really supposed to have. And I said, so if they say something that I disagree with, I'm just going to drop my head and nod, or, just kind of go, like I'm going to show some subtle gesture that I can get away with in the courtroom that what has been said about me is not true. I want the jury to see me react to the lies they're going to tell, rather than just sit there like this, because it just makes you look like a serial killer. I don't know why they tell their clients to do that. He was opposed to it, but he's my attorney, it's my life. And so he's like, all right, but you better fucking, keep it together. And so I was like, okay. So, I thought for sure the night before the trial, I was never going to sleep. I have had trouble sleeping my entire life. And I laid down in bed the night before going to face 12 years in the box. I fell asleep like a fucking baby. To this day, I can't explain it. I don't know how it was even possible. I don't know how it was possible. Like, I lose sleep over worrying about, what campsite we were going to stay at next when we were traveling, or which RV we were going to buy. I could just be up all night worrying about the most trivial things. And when it came to trying to find a way to go to sleep, to get up the ass crack of dawn, to face 12 years in prison, I just drifted right off to sleep. And so the morning of day one of the trial, they get me up, they feed me breakfast, they take me downstairs into this place that I've been going through. I described in one of the previous videos, where anytime you're going to court, you're shackled up and they take you in a line with a lot of other people. But when you are standing trial, it's very different. So you are assigned, I think in my case it was 4 or 6, I can't remember. There are 4 to 6 prison guards who are assigned to you, and they stay with you for the entire trial. So you get brought down from the jail, you go down into the basement, into this holding cell, and then your assigned team basically comes and picks you up, and they shackle your wrists to your waist, and they shackle your ankles. And then they go into this little room where there's boxes on the walls before they go into this tunnel. And this tunnel is connected to, but it's not a part of the jail, and it's not a part of the courtroom. And I guess it's dangerous when you're going through this tunnel with somebody who could be facing life in prison. And so they're kind of like, the guards are kind of like real relaxed with me for some reason. And they're kind of joking, and so what's going on, man? You going to trial today? And they're thinking it's nothing. And so one of the guards goes, what is it, like a little drug charge? You faced a couple years or something? And I said, no, I'm looking at 144 months. And boy, their backs stiffened up real quick. And he looks at me and he's like, really? And I said, yeah, I'm I'm looking at 144 months. And they're like, okay. And so they take you into this room and they make you face away from where they're at, and they get into these lock boxes and they take out their service pistols, and they're armed while they walk you this quarter of a mile or so through this tunnel leading to the courthouse. And so you do this prison shuffle all the way down. And so they're staying pretty quiet and they kind of stay away from you. So you're like walking in the center, and there's like 2 in front, 2 beside, and 2 behind. So that there's like, just in case you try some shit, there's a lot of cops down there. And so then they get to another room, which is now going into the courthouse, and then they have to remove their weapons again, put them back in these lock boxes, because I guess they can't carry them into the courtroom. And then they take you up in this single elevator, and so you're standing in this elevator and you're surrounded by all these cops, and it's just like silence and awkwardness. And so they lead you into the courtroom, and you go into the courtroom first in your shackles before anybody else gets there, and then they remove your shackles and everything, and then they sit you at the desk, the defendant's desk, and my attorney's there, and then they kind of sit like by the door, and they're like on guard, because now you're facing 144 months, and this is the first and only time you're in an unsecure facility. And you are now no longer cuffed and in restraints, so they have to be very wary that you're not going to try to make a run for it or do something crazy. So they're watching what the fuck's going on. So Leonard comes in, the attorneys come in, and my attorney explains to me that what we're going to be doing for the day, I think it was the entire day, is a process called Voir Dire. It's like VOIREDIRE. You can look it up, Voir Dire. Basically, Voir Dire is the process by which you select your jury. So a jury is not assigned to you. If you've ever been called to jury duty, you know this. In my case, I think there was like 50 people maybe total, maybe 75, I can't remember. So you've got like your stereotypical courtroom, and then you've got the galley where like anybody would come and sit to view the trial. And that's where all of these people who've been called to jury duty are sitting. And so you're looking around the room and you're kind of getting the lay of the land. And so Snohomish County in Washington State is north of King County, which is where Seattle's at. And it's actually a more conservative part of the area. So as you know, the politics and, well, depending on who you are, I think the politics in Seattle are some of the most deranged politics the world has ever known. But the people who live north in Snohomish County are somewhat more down to earth. They're farmers and ranchers and blue collar workers. And so, the majority of the faces in the room were, it's a jury of your peers. So anybody as young as 18 to, 60, 70 maybe, mostly white people. There was a couple of few black men and women, maybe 1 or 2 Asian people, and like somebody from India, a couple of people from India maybe. And so the process starts where we kind of all introduce ourselves, and the attorneys explain that I am effectively executing my constitutionally protected right to trial by jury, and that today we're going to be finding out who is going to decide my fate. And so we have to, from this pool of 50 to 75 people, select 12 jurors that we feel like are going to be friendly to our story in the case. And obviously the prosecution is trying to do the opposite, and so it's kind of like a logic problem game. And so we have data on every single one of the prospective jurors. You've got this printout. It says their name, their address, their age, their profession. I don't think it has any blurbs about them, but it's the general information about them. And so each side has a number of strikes. I think it's 6. I think each side can choose to strike 6 jurors. And so the game is that we want to find jurors that are going to rule in our favor, and the prosecution wants to find jurors that are going to rule in his favor. And so we want to strike his jurors, and he wants to strike ours, and then we hope that we end up, what we hope is that there's more people who are friendly to our case than are friendly to his case, because then we have better odds of selecting a jury who's going to give me a fair trial, basically. So this is when Leonard really comes into his own. And this is why you need a good attorney, because voir dire is one of the most important moments in your entire trial. It's going to be up to these people, not the judge. These 12 human beings are going to decide one of two. They're going to decide whether you are innocent. They're going to decide whether you're guilty or not guilty. And it's very important that you understand that at this stage of the game. Our criminal justice system does not weigh guilt and innocence. It's not about finding out whether you did something or didn't do something. What our criminal justice system is built to determine is are you not guilty of the crime, meaning that they could not prove that you did a crime, or are you guilty beyond a reasonable doubt because they proved beyond a reasonable doubt that you did the crime. This is never about innocence. And this is one thing that catches a lot of guys up who have committed a crime and they know they've committed a crime and they're like, well, why would I go to trial knowing I've committed a crime? Well, because committing a crime is not what our system is about, unfortunately. Our system is about, can they prove that you committed a crime beyond a reasonable doubt? I may make another video about trials, and I can actually tell you how you can beat 99.9% of all speeding tickets are illegal, and you can beat them in trial. I've done it 3 times in 3 different counties. So there are a lot of legal loopholes that you can take advantage of, even when you know you were guilty technically of the crime. So one of the first questions that my attorney asked the jury, the prospective jurors, he says, has anyone in the jury had an experience with a law enforcement officer that made you not trust the word of law enforcement officers? And to my surprise, hands are just going to the sky. I would say a minimum of 1/3 to 1/2 of the 50 plus people in that room, right out the gate, you're like, holy shit, these people don't trust cops. That's very good for me. And so once these hands go up, then each side has an opportunity to start questioning the individual prospective jurors individually. So he can say, you know, juror number 12, can you please explain to me why it is that you don't trust the word of a police officer? And, you know, she tells a story about how her son got into a fight with his girlfriend and the cops were called and he hadn't done anything wrong, and the cops just basically was like, well, you're a man, you're guilty, you're going to jail today. And there was no evidence. So she was like, ideal juror, right? Like, this woman literally has lived through an experience where the cops just automatically assume that the guy was not telling the truth. And I'm not going to waste your time with all of the various different stories. I don't remember all of them, but rest assured that my attorney is vigorously taking notes. And so what he's kind of created is like a grid on this piece of paper. And so he's got jurors lined out in their seats, and he's making notes in each one of the, so you've got juror number 1 and he's got a box, and juror number 2 and a box, and so on. And so he's making notes inside these boxes. And then if he finds somebody that you definitely don't want, he's, you know, trying to annotate that. But you gotta be careful, because the sneaky ass prosecutor over here might be trying to spy your notes to figure out which ones you want to keep and which ones you don't. In my case, it was pretty cut and dry. One of the pivotal things was we had a lot of people who did not trust the police. So that was very good for us. Then they start asking questions to kind of generically release jurors. So, is there any reason that you feel like you could not render a verdict in this case? Do you happen to know anyone in the courtroom? There were various questions that were asked, and I think that only actually got rid of maybe 3 people who had some reason why they knew the judge or something. They couldn't be considered to be objective witnesses or objective jurors. So then one of the next pivotal questions that my attorney explains is, he says, in this case, what we really have is a he said, she said situation. You're not going to see a lot of evidence that's going to prove that my client is guilty. So I would like to know from you, in a case like this, and they don't know how much time I'm facing. They only know the charges. The jury's not allowed to know what the cost of their verdict is. So unless they do their own private research, they have no idea how much time I'm facing. They just have a list of counts. And so with the counts that Mr. Van Dusen has been accused of, what kind of evidence would you need to see in order to render a guilty verdict? And this was saving grace number 2. So the vast majority, actually, of the people in the voir dire room, in the jury box, selection box, said things like, I would want to see blood splatter, DNA. I would want to see audio files, video files. Like, I would want to see some definitive proof. He said, she said is not enough. Like, pretty much everybody in the courtroom, you know, we've all been primed by like Law and Order or Dexter or CSI. People understand that when a crime has been committed, there's usually a crime scene investigation team who goes out, puts all these pieces together to definitively prove that this person has done this crime. And in my case, they don't have any of this. They don't have any audio recordings, video recordings. They've got very limited actual evidence. And so we're starting to select these people based on the fact they don't trust the police. They will not find guilt unless there's good, concrete evidence of that a crime has been committed. So then they start asking questions like, has anybody you know ever been to prison? Anybody you know ever been unfairly adjudicated? Lots of things that start coming out. And so while all of this is going on, and questions are being asked, and people are being interviewed independently, I'm sitting there, and again, I'm not sitting there stone-faced, you know, like a psycho killer. I'm smiling. I'm leaning across the table. I'm using body language the way I do in my videos. I'm making eye contact with the jurors. When they tell a story about something negative that happened to them, I'm using the facial expressions that convey, like, oh, I'm sorry that happened to you, or somebody tells a joke and I laugh at appropriate times. And so it was kind of cool because you start to get very comfortable with these people. They start to become truly your peers. They're being told that they have to decide your fate. They have no reason to dislike you on spec. They have no reason to dislike you just because you're sitting there. And understand, I'm clean cut, I'm clean shaven, I'm young, I've got some nice clothes on, I'm not all covered in tattoos, I don't look like, I'm not off-putting to your average middle-class, conservative, white person, which was what made up almost my entire jury. And so, again, we go through all of this process, and then piece by piece, we start to select a jury. Another one of the questions that was asked was about gun rights. Do you feel that a person has the right to carry a gun? How do you feel about guns? Do you shoot guns? And surprisingly, even in Washington State, because it's up there in the north, there were a lot of gun owners and pro-Second Amendment people in the courtroom. And so at the end of the day, we selected a jury of 12 people, and I honestly feel like, I don't know why I need to get timers for everything. I honestly feel like I would have picked 11 of the 12. If I could have just picked at random, I would have picked 10, at least 10, maybe 11 of the 12. There was one female, older female on the jury that the prosecution got on there, and she was definitely a hostile juror. She definitely did not like me. I got the strong impression that the vast majority of the other jurors were going to be very, very fair in their viewing of the case. So, okay, so jury selection goes, honestly, like I said, as well as could be expected. I'm going to have trouble with the time frame here. I know that there was 4 days of trial, and I think when I say 4 days of trial, that the 4th day was the verdict. I can't remember if it was 4 days and then a verdict. I'm going to give you all the details, so I can't remember exactly the time period. I think that Voir Dire took up basically all of the first day. I don't recall if we got to testimony after voir dire. So once the jury was selected, juror number 1 was he was a middle-aged white guy who I felt was very, very favorable to me. Juror number 2 was a younger middle-aged, probably early 30s white female. She was a gun owner, and she actually was one of the few who testified that I don't know if she owned a gun range or she spent a lot of time at a gun range because she was like a real pro Second Amendment, women's defense, women should have arms, you know. Seemed real like the state's not gonna pull one over on me. Had several people on the jury that were younger, that were close to my age. There was a guy who was like a college student, male Indian guy from India. I can't remember all of them, but basically I felt strongly about jurors 1 through 10 or 11, and coincidentally juror 12 was the juror. She was probably in her late 60s, 70s, very skinny white woman, and she just had a scowl on her face the whole time. Somebody hurt her. You know, she may have been a victim at some time of some kind of domestic violence, and I knew pretty much that this woman was my mortal enemy. And so I believe it was at the end of jury selection when they put all 12 jurors on the stand that some further in their box, that some further questions were asked of them that will prove pivotal in the case going forward. So I'm going to tell you what that question was. Again, it had been reiterated, it had been made known to the jurors that this was basically a he said, she said case. That you know, there was very little evidence in the case to back up the allegations, and so at the end, and my attorney said, in all honesty, it's a travesty that this case could even be brought. The criminal justice system in America is not designed to hear he said, she said cases. This man should not even be sitting on trial right now. But unfortunately he is, and unfortunately we're here, and so we have to give him his day in court, and we are going to make the case that it was physically impossible for him to have committed the vast majority of the crimes that the, like I say her last name, that the prosecution is alleging, okay? The victim is alleging. And my attorney said, because of the nature of the case, you know, this is a case where it's being claimed that Mr. Van Dusen nearly killed someone in the commission of this crime. And he said, have any of you you in the jury ever had what you considered to be a life or death situation? And his hands start going up. And so juror number 1 testifies in the courtroom that he was into skydiving, and that he had jumped out of a plane, and that his I don't know how skydiving works. I don't get in planes, but I guess you've got like a main chute and then a backup chute. And when he pulled the ripcord, his main chute failed to deploy. And it took him 30 seconds in free fall in order to get his reserve, however, to get under canopy is what he called it. And he said, so for 30 seconds, I'm free falling to earth thinking that I'm going to die. And Leonard, my attorney, said, how well can you remember those 30 seconds? And the guy was like, I remember every blink of every eye. Like, I can tell you the sounds, the smells, what it felt like, what my heart, my thoughts, like he was like, I have super recall of everything that happened. It's like, okay, thank you very much. Juror number 2's hand goes up, and he says, could you tell us about your experience? And she says, well, I was in a car accident, and I was driving down the highway, and I don't remember all the details, but she got into a car accident, and her car rolled completely over and was sitting on its top, and she's hanging inside the car, and he said, can you remember in detail what that was like? And she's like, Absolutely. I could taste the powder from the airbags exploding. I could hear the other cars because it was like a pile up hitting her car, and she could remember when one car bumped into hers and it kind of rotated hers on the ground, the thoughts about her kids, the thought that she was going to get crushed in this car, and she's just telling this story. And so you're getting sucked into this person's story about this harrowing experience that she had, nearly dying in a car accident. And I don't remember all of the others, but there was like 4 or maybe 6 people who had some kind of experience in life. I think one guy got mugged. One guy had a gun pointed at him or something. I don't remember like all of the stories in great detail. The first 2 are the ones that stuck out the most. And so there were multiple people who had experiences in their lifetime where they thought that this might be it. And 100% of the people who had life-threatening experiences testified that they had what they felt like was perfect recall of the event. And so this is going to be very pivotal when we get into my ex-wife's testimony on the stand, because coincidentally, her fucking recall, not so good. Okay, so now we have our jury selected. We know exactly who's going to be deciding my fate. And as I said, really things could not have gone much better with the exception of the single juror. But the good news is, in a case like this, in order for me to be found guilty, I have to be found unanimously guilty. Anything less than 12 people saying, I believe beyond a shadow of a doubt, a reasonable doubt, that this man is guilty of these crimes, and the jury is hung, and I completely walk on these charges. This is why this very rarely happens. And so I'm not terribly concerned about juror number 12, because there's so many people on this jury that I feel like right now, as it stands, they already want to believe in my innocence. And that's the thing that people discount about going to jury trial. There are a lot of human beings involved, and it's really in human nature. If you see a person who's not off-putting looking to you, and they start developing a rapport with you, and it's in our nature to kind of want to trust a person until they give us a reason not to. So when the jury had been selected, the vast majority of these people did not seem like they were carrying any animosity at all. In fact, a lot of them seemed almost excited, like they were like, okay, well, this is interesting. What the fuck is going on here, And so now we know exactly who we have to convince of my side of the story. And then before the end of trial that day, so the next day is going to start the official proceedings for the trial going forward. We're going to start calling witnesses, and we're going to get into the nuts and bolts of this thing. If you remember, I showed you this picture earlier that shows the charges that they brought against me. So one of the things that we were kind of banking on all along was that they charged me with assault with a deadly weapon twice. That there's a gun pointed supposedly, and then there's another gun pointed, but the victim, the alleged victim in the crime, never actually testified to that anywhere in her statement, nor did she say that in her deposition. And so this is another thing you guys have to understand. If you ever find yourself in this situation, they can charge you with whatever they want to charge you. They can indict you on whatever they want to indict you. In a separate matter I was involved in, I had an attorney tell me that they can indict a ham sandwich if they want. Like, it's a total joke. They are free to just charge all kinds of nonsense. And then what happens is, when it actually comes time to prove it, they have to dismiss the charges they know that they have zero chance at proving. And so the way that they wanted me to take a deal for 7 years, and if I refused to take the 7-year deal, then they threatened me with 144 months. But what we pretty much knew was that they were just adding adding charges trying to scare me. They were trying to play hardball. They knew that they only really had 7 years of crimes, but they didn't want to tell me that because then there's no downside. If you're offering me 7 years in prison, or I can go to trial for 7 years in prison, well, obviously I'm going to roll the dice and take the 7. So they added a charge that they knew they couldn't really convict me on just to test my balls, just to see how serious I really was. They just tried to scare me with a bullshit charge, and I called their fucking bluff. Leonard admitted that he thought that that might happen, but we couldn't possibly know. And so at the end of the first day, before they sent me back to my holding cell, George Apple, the prosecutor, stood up and said, at this point, the state would like to dismiss count 2, assault 2 with a deadly weapon. And so the second he did that, I now have a jury that I think is sympathetic to what I'm going to say. And we're now back to square one, where worst case scenario, I cannot get more time than they offered me. So I'm going to get the chance to fight and prove my innocence with really nothing to lose. Because the reality is that the jury could find me guilty of all of the charges, none of the charges, or one of the charges. And so at least now I have a fighting chance. And so they closed court that day. They take me back to my unit. The guys are all waiting around at the door to see what's going on. And I come in beaming like, boys, we got a fucking shot at this. So there you have it. That's day 1 of jury trial, Voir Dire. When I come back in the next video, which I'm going to try to shoot either right now or right after dinner, we're going to get into the really exciting point, finally, that I know a lot of you have been waiting for, because the state is going to call their first witness, my ex-wife, and she's going to take the stand and tell her side of what happened on the night that I was arrested. So stay tuned for that. And as always, we'll see you on the next one.